Good morning, students. Welcome to Computer Organization class. This is Veena A. Patil from Department of CSE BLE CET Vijaypur. In the last video, we have seen what is the meaning of interrupt and how interrupt can be handled, and how interrupt can be enabled or disabled. We also saw the hardware for the interrupt. Let's summarize the sequence of events involved in handling an interrupt request from a single device. Once again, whatever we had studied in the previous video. Whenever an interrupt occurs, the device raises an interrupt request. The processor interrupts the program currently being executed and saves the content of the PC and PS registers. Interrupts are disabled by clearing the interrupt enable bit in the PC to 0. The actions requested by the interrupt is performed by the interrupt service routine, during which time the device is informed that its request has been recognized, and in response it deactivates the interrupt request signal. Upon completion of the interrupt service routine, the saved content of the PC and PS register are restored and execution of the interrupt program is resumed. That is, interrupt enable bit is made to 1. So this is a summary of how interrupt occurs and how it will be executed. So now let's say handling multiple devices. Now, in situation where a number of devices capable of initiating interrupts are connected to the processor, if many devices are connected to the processor, say we have two devices X and Y, which are going to make interrupt request, there will be situations like, say for example, several devices may request interrupt at exactly the same time. This gives rise to a number of questions. How can the processor determine which device is requesting an interrupt? Or given that a different devices are likely to request different interrupt service routine, how can the processor obtain the starting address of appropriate routine in each case? Now, should a device be allowed to interrupt the processor while another interrupt is being served? Or how should two or more simultaneous interrupt requests be handled? Now, to handle multiple interrupt, when an interrupt request is received, it is necessary to identify the particular device that raised the request. Now, which device has raised the request? Identifying that device is a question. Now, if two devices raise interrupt request at the same time, then there will be an ambiguity as which has raised. The information needed to determine whether a device is requesting an interrupt is available in its status register. We also already have seen in a diagram, that is interrupt request bit, that is keyboard interrupt request and display interrupt request will be enabled. So device requesting the interrupt, its IRQ bit will become 1. So this is the diagram which we have seen, in which the status register is having display interrupt request and keyboard interrupt request bits, and these two bits, depending on their interrupt, if they are set to 1, it means the interrupt has occurred through these devices. So processor serves the device using the polling method, but polling needs more time. So we go for vectored interrupts. Now what is vectored interrupt? Now vectored interrupt we use to reduce the time involved in the polling process. A device requesting an interrupt may identify itself directly to the processor. Then the processor can identify the start executing the corresponding interrupt service routine. Now whenever an interrupt occurs, along with the interrupt signal, the device itself will identify by giving its code, device code or device address. Now depending on that, the processor will identify the device and its particular interrupt service routine will be executed. Now, a device requesting an interrupt can identify itself if it has its two interrupt request signal, its own interrupt request signal, or if it can send a special code like the memory address of interrupt service routine to the processor through a interconnection network. Now, while sending the request and the code of the device, it can also send the code of the interrupt service routine that has to be executed. So it becomes easy for the processor to identify which interrupt service routine it has to execute, and it will execute that particular interrupt service routine. Now, a commonly used scheme is to allow permanently an area in the memory to hold the address of interrupt service routine. Now, these addresses are usually referred to as interrupt vectors, and they are said to constitute the interrupt vector table. So, there will be a table or a memory allocated for this interrupt vector table, wherein there will be a code and the addresses. Here this will be a code and there will be an address. Now for a particular interrupt service routine, there will be codes, and these codes will be sent by the device itself to the processor. So the processor will understand which code, and for that particular code there will be address of the interrupt service routine that has to be executed. So when an interrupt request arrives, the information provided by the requesting device is used as a pointer into the interrupt vector table, and the address in the corresponding interrupt vector is automatically loaded into the program counter. We can handle multiple devices by using interrupt nesting. If requests from more than one device are generated, then sometimes some devices need immediate response from processor. Say for example, if it is a request from system clock, a real-time system, then its request has to be given priority. So this can be resolved using priority based interrupt. So we have multiple level of priorities. Now interrupt request will accept from some devices, but from and will not accept from other devices depending upon the device's priority. So to implement this scheme, we can assign a priority level to the processor that can be changed under program control. Now interrupt requests from high priority devices will be accepted first. The processor priority can be encoded in a few bits of the processor status register. So in processor status register, the priority will be given for each device. Now say for example, we have something known as privileged instruction. Now whenever the system is working in superior mode, that is whenever it is executing operating system routine, then the processor we say it is in privileged instruction mode. And in this mode, if any interrupt occurs, it should not disturb the operating system work. So what we do is we give importance or priority for the subroutines which are executing in operating system mode, and whenever these are executing, no other interrupts are allowed to occur. So such instructions we call as privileged instruction. But whenever the system is in user mode, that is user program, cannot accidentally or intentionally change the priority which disrupt the system operation, which can be avoided using privilege exception. Now whenever the system is performing operating system work and the user applications, like we have different applications in our system, if he is in the user mode and if he tries to accidentally change the priority of the operating system subroutines or the interrupts, then it should not be allowed, and this can be done by using exception message called privilege exception. So whenever a user mode program tries to change the priority of the superior mode, that is operating system subroutines, priority, then a exception will be raised, and that is called as privileged exception. So what is exception? Exception is nothing but a message will be shown to the user mode application program that it doesn't have the right to change the priority of the higher or superior mode programs, that it cannot change the operating system subroutines. Now let's see handling multiple devices using multiple priority scheme implementation. Now we are using individual interrupt request and interrupt request acknowledgement line. So we have different devices here connected with their own interrupt request line and interrupt acknowledgement line. So you can see here device 1, device 2, device 3, so on, n number of devices can be connected. Each device has its own interrupt request line and it has its own interrupt acknowledgement line. So all these devices interrupt request line will be connected to the priority arbitration circuit that is situated inside the processor. Now this priority arbitration circuit will find the priority of the devices that are connected, and depending on the priority it will acknowledge that particular device. So this is how multiple interrupts are handled. This priority arbitration circuit, it assigns a different priority levels to the devices. The arbitrator gets requests on different lines, it evaluates them and issues an acknowledge signal to the highest priority device among the currently requesting devices. Later, a request is accepted only if it has a higher priority level than the currently assigned to the processor. Now, a simplest possible priority arbitrator may consist of a single priority encoder. Let's assume, or suppose we have 8 devices, then we can use a 8 to 3 priority encoder to encode the priority as a 3-bit binary number from 00 to 111. So this model shows how multiple priorities can be handled, or you can say this is a multiple priority scheme. Now we will see one more example wherein multiple requests are received over a single interrupt request line at the same time. I am polling the status register of the input output devices is the simplest way to handle such request. Now in this case, priority is determined by the order in which the devices are polled. Now whenever we are using vectored interrupt, we must ensure that only one device is selected to send its interrupt vector code. Now we'll see how simultaneous requests can be handled. We have a model here which is called as a daisy chain method, and it is a commonly used hardware arrangement for handling many requests over a single interrupt request line. You can see in the diagram the interrupt request line INTR bar, this line is common to all devices, and the acknowledgement line interrupt acknowledge INTA is connected in a daisy chain fashion. Now the INTA signal, it propagates serially through the devices. Daisy chain in the sense it propagates serially through the devices. Now when several devices raise an interrupt request and the interrupt request line is activated, the proper response by the processor responds by setting the interrupt request acknowledgement line to 1. This signal is received by device 1, the first device. If device 1 has requested the interrupt, it blocks the interrupt acknowledgement signal and sends its identity or identification with identifying interrupt vector on the data bus. Now if device 1 has not requested the service, it passes the interrupt request acknowledgement signal to the next device, device 2, and so on. Hence, in the daisy chain arrangement, the device that is physically closer to the processor has the highest priority, and this sort of arrangement it requires very fewer lines than the one which we studied previously. So I am repeating. So there will be in a daisy chain, there will be interrupt request is common to all devices, interrupt request line is common to all devices, and interrupt acknowledgement is connected in a daisy chain fashion, where interrupt acknowledgement signal propagates serially through the device. Now when interrupt request is active on interrupt request line, then interrupt request acknowledgement will be sent to device 1, and it passes to device 2 if it does not require any service. In daisy chain, the devices that is electrically closest to the processor has the highest priority. So we shall see one more arrangement. This is arranged on priority based on the grouping. Now we are going to combine the previous two schemes, that is multiple priority and daisy chain. Both we are combining here, and we are going to design one more that combination where devices are organized in groups, and each will have different priority levels. Within a group, devices are connected to a daisy chain. Now, computer systems use specialized interface circuitry to handle multiple interrupt requests from the devices. For example, we have a chip called programmable interrupt controller 8. It is 8259 PIC, which can handle up to 8 interrupt requests at a time. Also, by cascading such PICs, more number of requests can be handled. Now, controlling device requests is one of the important things. So, it is important to ensure that interrupt requests are generated only to those input-output devices that the processor is currently willing to recognize. Now, we need a mechanism in the interface circuitry for individual devices to control whether a device is allowed to interrupt the processor or not. And the control needed is usually provided in the form of an interrupt enable bit in the device interface circuitry. By setting this interrupt enable bit, we can assign the device or we can control the device to reduce unnecessary interrupt from the other input output devices which are not used by current executing program. This we have already seen, that keyboard interrupt enable bit is KEN, display interrupt enable bit is DEN, and these bits will be set to 1, then only interface circuit can generate an interrupt request. Same time, we have keyboard interrupt request as well as display interrupt request, which can be set to 1, indicating that both devices is requesting an interrupt. So whenever an interrupt has to be generated, these bits will be set to 1. Now let's see one example. When a program wishes to read an input line from the keyboard and store the characters in successive byte locations, we had written this program. See, this is a main program wherein we have already dealt with this, wherein we have a buffer pointer. This is a pointer which is going to point to the line in the memory location called line, and we have here EOL, which is end of line indicator. The second bit of the control register, when it is set to 1, it will enable the interrupt. So we write a bit set to enable the keyboard interrupt. We also set the bit 9th of the PC, so it will set interrupt enable bit in the PC. Now in the interrupt service routine, whenever a key is pressed on the keyboard, interrupt service routine is executed. So interrupt service routine is same as that of normal routines. Now in this, before this interrupt service routine starts execution, as the processor has to store the information before the service routine. Here we are using move multiples to store the content of the registers R0 to R1 on top of the stack, so that while returning back these values are retained. So the processor values that are stored in R0 to R1 should not be distorted. So we save it on top of the stack. So we save them on top of the stack using save the registers, that is move multiples. And now we are saying move the content of PNTR variable to R0. That is nothing but it is loading the address of the pointer. Here we have seen the pointer is pointing to a memory location called 9. So hash indicates that its address is stored in the pointer. So we are copying that into R0. Then we say move bytes data in comma R1. So this subroutine is going to execute whenever a key is pressed on the keyboard. That's why we said whenever it is enabled, keyboard is enabled to interrupt, this subroutine will be called. So we are going to move the data that is stored in the data in register of the keyboard to a register R1. So that is get the first character that is pressed on the keyboard. Similarly, we want to copy the content of the register to a memory location, that is to store it into the memory location. I say move bytes R1 to a memory location that is pointed by R0. And after storing it into the memory location, increase the pointer to the next memory location so that the next value which is going to be read should be stored into new place. Then we say move the content of the new address to the variable PNTR. That is nothing but updating the pointer. Then we are going to see whether the carriage return has been occurred or not, whether the new entered value is a carriage return or not. That is, we compare it with a $0D and the content of the R1. This I have explained already. Then if it is not equal to 0D, we say return, go to return. In return, what we have returning back to the main program. Before that, we will see here. If it is not equal to 0, that is, if it is not equal to 0, we have return. If it is equal to 0 or something else, then we assign that hash 1 to EOL, which is nothing but it is indicating the end of the line. Otherwise, it goes on repeating on the same line. So whenever this character is encountered 0D, it will move the cursor to a new line. Otherwise, it will move the cursor ahead on the same line. Okay, so here we are going to indicate that this is the end of the line, and we clear the bit of the control register, that is the second bit, which will disable the keyboard interrupts. Right now, here when before going to the main program, we have to copy back the contents of the register R0 and R1 which are stored on top of the stack. So we say move multiple, so all the values will be moved from the top of the stack to R0 and R1. Then whenever return from interrupt is encountered, the control goes back to the main program, so that a new character, if it is pressed on the keyboard, is going to be read. Now let's have a look on exceptions. The term exception is used to refer to any event that causes an interrupt. Okay. It can be input output interrupts is one of the example of exception. An interrupt in any event that causes the execution of one program to be suspended and the another program to begin. In a computer system, large number of input-output operations like data transfer, disk operations, file handling, and so on are handled using interrupt techniques. The operating system performs these operations on behalf of application program written by user. Thus, the interrupt need not always be caused by an external device. Now, Intel literature uses the term exception to refer to any internal condition caused due to software or hardware. For example, as we have discussed earlier, processor will have privileged instruction to be run in the superior mode. An attempt to execute a privileged instruction in the user mode, it can cause an interrupt called privilege exception. Now, generally exceptions occur when some invalid operation or malfunctioning of the system happens. The interrupt service routine written for these cases are used to protect the computer system as well as to inform the user about the problem. For example, when a divide by zero operation happens, the operating system raises an exception and it will prompt the user about this malfunction. Now let us consider or we'll see some more kinds of exceptions. Now the first one is recovery from error. A variety of techniques are available to ensure that all hardware components are operating properly. Many computers include an error checking code in the main memory. If an error occurs, the control hardware detects it and informs the processor by raising an interrupt. Now, a program may be interrupted if the processor detects an error or an unusual condition while executing the instruction of this program. For example, the opcode field of an instruction may not correspond to an legal instruction, or an arithmetic instruction may attempt divide by 0. So, when exception processing is initiated as a result of such errors, the processor it suspends the program being executed and starts an exception service routine. And this routine takes appropriate action to recover from the error if possible, else it will inform the user about it. The other type of exception is debugging. The system software usually includes a program called debugger, which helps the programmer to find errors in the program. The debugger uses exceptions to provide two important facilities, that is trace and breakpoint. When a processor is operating in trace mode, an exception occurs. It occurs after execution of every instruction. Now, this uses the debugger program as the exception service routine, which enables the user to examine the content of register, memory location, etc. After the processor returns from the debugging program, the next instruction in the main program is executed and the debugger program is activated again. During the execution of the debugging program, the trace exception is disabled. Now, trace mode operation is also known as single stepping. Single stepping helps in finding error after each instruction execution. However, this slows down the performance. So, this method of debugging is useful for a program with few instructions and not containing loops or any control structures. Breakpoint. Now, breakpoint, it provides a facility to interrupt the program at specific points selected by the user, unlike the trace mode. An instruction called trap or software interrupt is usually provided for this purpose. The execution of this instruction causes the same actions as a hardware interrupt. While debugging a program, the user may wish to interrupt program execution after, say, instruction I in the instruction. The debugger routine, it saves instruction I plus 1 and replaces it with a software interrupt instruction. When the program reaches this point, the debugging routine is activated. This gives the user a chance to examine contents of register and memory. When the user is ready to continue execution his or her program, the debugging routine restores the instruction that was at location I plus 1 and executes a return from interrupt instruction. Now, breakpoint method of debugging is useful when the program is large. Now, HLL, like high-level languages like C, gives options for breakpoint like set breakpoints or clear breakpoints, as well as for trace mode operations. The third type is privilege exception. Now, to protect the operating system from being modified by user programs, certain instructions can be executed only when the processor is in the superior mode. These instructions are called privilege instructions. When the processor is running in the user mode, it cannot execute an instruction that changes the priority level of the processor or enables a user program to access areas in the main memory that have been allocated to other users. An attempt to execute such an instruction will produce a privilege exception. As a result, the processor switches to the superior mode and begins to execute an appropriate routine in the operating system. So, the implementation details vary from one operating system to another operating system. So, this will help to avoid any damage to operating system by the user. So, we shall learn about direct memory access. We have seen that two techniques of interfacing input-output device, that is program controlled input-output, where data are transferred by executing instruction such as move data in comma not, and interrupt controlled input-output, where the processor is informed by the device using interrupt signals. Now, in both these approaches, the processor is involved for each transfer. Hence, in both these schemes, there is a considerable amount of delay involved for each data transfer, since only one byte of word can be transferred through processor at a time. For large volume of data transfer at a fast rate, another approach is used. Whenever we want to transfer large amount of data, another transfer method is used, and it is better to have a scheme wherein a large block of data can be directly transferred between an external device and the main memory without continuous intervention by the processor, and this method or this approach is called as a direct memory access or DMA. Now, DMA transfer are performed by a control circuitry that is part of input-output device interface. It is called as a DMA controller. The DMA controller, it performs the function that would normally be carried out by the processor when accessing the main memory. So, for each word transfer, it provides the memory address and all the bus signals that control data transfer. Since it has to transfer block of data, the DMA controller must increment the memory address for successive words and keep track of the number of transfers. So, DMA controller can transfer data without intervention by the processor, but its operation under the control of program executed by the processor. To initiate the transfer of a block of words, the processor sends the starting address, the number of words in the block, and the direction of the transfer, whether it is from the main memory to secondary memory or secondary memory to main memory. On receiving this information, the DMA controller it proceeds to perform the requested operation. When the entire block has been transferred, the controller informs the processor by raising an interrupt signal. Until then, it will not interrupt the processor. While a DMA transfer is taking place, the program that requested the transfer cannot continue, and the processor can be used to execute another program. After the DMA transfer is completed, the processor can return to the program that requested the transfer. Now, input-output operations are always performed by the operating system of the computer in response to the request from an application program. The operating system is also responsible for suspending the execution of one program and starting another. Thus, for an input-output operation involving DMA, the operating system it puts the program that requested the transfer in the blocked state, initiates the DMA operation, and starts the execution of another program. When the transfer is completed, the DMA controller informs the processor by suspending an interrupt request. In response, the operating system it puts the blocked or suspended program in the runnable state so that it can be selected by the scheduler to continue the execution. Now this figure shows the DMA controller registers that are used to accessed by the processor to initiate transfer operations. Now the two registers are used for storing the starting address and the word count, that is starting address and the word count. And the third register contains a status and control flags. The read-write bit, that is RW bar bit, determines the direction of the transfer, whether it is a read operation or a write operation. If the bit is 0, it will be a read. If it is 1, it will be read. If it is 0, it will be a write. When this bit is set to 1 by a program instruction, that is equal to 1, the controller performs a read operation. That is, it transfers data from memory to input-output device. When this bit is set to 0, DMA controller performs a write operation, that is transfer data from input device to memory. When the controller has completed transfer of data, a block of data, and is ready to receive another command, it sends the done flag of this will be set to 1. When interrupt enable flag is set to 1, we have here 30th bit. This flag causes the DMA controller to raise an interrupt after it has completed transferring a block of data. Finally, the controller sets the interrupt request bit to 1 when it has requested an interrupt. The figure shows how DMA controllers are used in a computer system. A DMA controller consists of high-speed network to the computer bus. The disk controller, which controls 2 disks, has DMA capacity and provides 2 DMA channels. These two are shown here in the figure. It can perform 2 independent DMA operations. To start DMA transfer of a block of data from main memory to one of the disks, a routine in the operating system writes the following information into the registers of the corresponding channel to the disk controller. That is, it writes memory address, it writes word count, and the function to be performed, whether it is a read or a write. Now the DMA controller proceeds independently to implement the specified function. When the DMA controller is complete, this information is recorded in the status and control register of the DMA controller by setting the done bit to 1. Now, memory accessed by the processor and DMA controller are interleaved, and request by DMA devices for using the bus are always given higher priority than the processor request. Among different DMA devices, top priority is given to high-speed peripherals such as disk or a network interface. Since there are two ways in which the DMA operations can be carried out. In the first method, the DMA controller is given exclusive access to the memory to transfer a block of data without any interruption, and this is known as block or burst mode. DMA transfer, block or burst mode DMA transfer. But the drawback of this method is that a processor may have to wait for longer time duration to access memory, because since DMA operations need to be completed to give back the control of the bus to the processor. And in the second method, the processor originates most memory access cycles. The DMA controller is said to steal memory cycles from the processor when the processor is not accessing the main memory. The cycles are taken by the DMA controller, and this method is known as cycle stealing DMA. Now, a conflict may arise if both the processor and a DMA controller or two DMA controllers try to use the burst at the same time to access the main memory. And to resolve these conflicts, an arbitration procedure is implemented on the bus to contribute the activities of all devices requesting memory transfer. Now, the bus arbitration and different methods we will see in the next video. Till then, please read the textbook. Take care. Thank you.